Ultiman234 here, and welcome to another episode of Forgotten Media, where I dig up some stuff you may or may not have heard of. Ah yes, American Mcgee, a man known for having an interest in the macabre, and has also helped out on some video games like the Doom and Quake franchises. But whenever someone says his name, he's more well known for his games being a dark and twisted take on Alice in Wonderland, such as the first game, simply called American Mcgee's Alice, its sequel, Alice Madness Returns, and the latest title, Alice Asylum, which ended up getting cancelled. Damn you, EA! Anyway, Wonderland wasn't the only fairy tale realm that he made his mark on. There's quite a collection of others that he's done in the past. Which brings us to today's topic, American Mcgee's Grimm, an episodic game that was released back in 2008. This was also the first game made by Spicy Horse, a very short-lived game development team that was founded in China, and I'm sure that the only people that actually remember that company was when they worked on Alice Madness Returns. Now, I have a bit of a history with Grimm on this channel. A couple of years ago, I covered the Grimm comic miniseries that was made by IDW as part of Mixed Batch. In 2021, I uploaded the game's entire soundtrack, mainly because I was surprised that no one had ever bothered doing it, so I was just like, fine, I'll do it myself. Then a year later, I uploaded all of the dialogue of the characters from the game. And now that it's 2023, I decided to finally cover the game itself to celebrate its 15th anniversary. So, Grimm. This is a game I've known about for years. I think the first time I've heard about it was when they showed off the opening cutscene on an episode of Cinematech on G4. I think it was from an episode where they were showing off upcoming games for their time. Anyway, Grimm was first released on GameTap, an old PC gaming server where you could buy and play retro games, as well as the newest titles. And it even had Knuckles Chaotix. Yes, the Sonic game infamous for only being a 32X exclusive was supposedly available there for a time. On Grimm's page, you were able to play the first episode for free, while you had to pay money to play the other episodes. But since GameTab isn't a thing anymore, I'll be playing the Steam version instead. One interesting thing about this version is that some of the icons used are actually panels taken straight from the Grimm comics by IDW. In this game, you play the character of Grimm, a nasty and disgruntled dwarf who's fed up with how fairy tales have been toned down to be more kid-friendly over the years. So now he's on a mission to bring back their darker origins, or at least make them dark as possible. And that's about it. Each episode focuses on one particular fairy tale, where Grimm opens up with how the story is told nowadays being all friendly and colorful. The presentation is amusing in this puppet theater look. Sometimes the characters are moving around like wobbly ragdolls, and other times they have animation, but most of the time they just bounce up and down. After that, Grimm enters the story on certain scenes to spread his dark aura on everything, making the ground all disgusting, walls and scenery more dark and twisted, and happy-go-lucky characters made to look more miserable or gruesome. Think of it as a reverse Super Mario Sunshine in a way. After reaching a certain level, you can perform a butt stomp on the main characters, or a certain item, to continue the story. After doing this for a couple of levels, the episode ends with a retelling of the fairy tale, now given a grim re-envisioning. Honestly, these bits can be hit or miss. Most of the time it's still the same story, just with the dialogue spiced up to be more cynical or edgy. Sometimes it features twists or alternate takes, but most of the time the dark theater bits are more abridged retellings of the light theater ones. And it is quite jarring that despite all the gruesome stuff that you do in gameplay, most of that doesn't really translate into the dark retelling at the end of each episode. As for the gameplay itself, it's a very basic 3D platformer. You run, you jump, you platform, you butt stomp, you piss, rinse and repeat. Each level starts off at a bottom rank, sometimes different ranks depending on the level, and increases the more darkness you spread onto the world. Doing so will increase the spread of Grimm's dark aura, and being able to jump higher, as well as increase how far Grimm can piss. That might come off as random, but there is a bit of an explanation to that. If you tilt the camera, Grimm will start pissing on the floor, which will let you auto-jump to wherever he pissed on. The higher the rank you get, the longer it becomes. So it's kind of like the auto-jump ability in the first Mcgee's Alice game. Your main enemies are the fairy tale villagers and animals that want to keep their world all clean and happy by removing the darkness you've spread. They can be annoying, but you can stun them with a butt stomp, or sometimes cause environments to distract them. If you reach a certain level, you can also transform them into dark versions of themselves to stop all the cleaning. Other times it'll be pools of water killing you, falling into the abyss, or other stage hazards that can harm you. There are some power-ups you can find in the game. You got some of the basic ones like a super speed and a high jump, and then you've got others like a slow-mo power-up that slows down time, Sausage Stomp, which causes Grimm to spread his dark aura in a straight line, similar to a string of sausages, a super butt stomp, which is only used in 3 episodes. The first time it creates a big shockwave to your butt stomp, while the other 2 episodes are used more thematically to clear certain obstacles. And finally, there's the Flaming Pea power-up, which is, self-explanatory.
My bladder's ablaze!
Outside of reaching point A to point B, there are some optional objectives you can do, such as beat the level in the fastest time, try to get a high ranking from covering the world in darkness, and finding the tokens that are hidden in every level. In later episodes, the tokens add a time bonus that removes some seconds off the clock, which can be useful. From what I've heard, some levels can be very stingy when you're trying to go for that gold ranking on time runs. But aside from that, the only things worth getting are the tokens. Collecting them all in an episode will unlock the gallery, where you can view the props from the episode in both their light and dark styles. It is cool to see the textures change and the models themselves warp from being cheerful to menacing, though it is strange that they don't feature any character models in the gallery. And that's all the basics for Grimm. In terms of gameplay, well, what you see is what you get with its simplicity. It can be repetitive at times. Granted, some episodes can be more challenging and the gameplay does improve over time, but if you're in the mood for some beat-em-up gameplay or an in-depth story, then you're not going to find it here. I say this game is more for casual players, that and fans of fairy tales and their origins. Maybe John Solo and a bit Frank would enjoy this game. The highlights from this game are definitely the visuals, seeing bright and simple things being turned into something more dark and more detailed. And of course, the character of Grimm is entertaining listening to all of his commentary on the fairy tales.
After abandoning her home, this abused and starving freak happens upon the royal garden and steals a pear. Maybe the guards will stab her. I can hope, can't I?
It's also worth noting that Grimm and all the other characters are all voiced by one guy, Roger L. Jackson, a guy who has done a lot of voice work over the years, probably best known for Mojo Jojo and the Powerpuff Girls, and voicing certain characters from the Mcgee Alice games. This game really shows just how much of a vocal range Roger has. Sometimes the characters sound the same, especially when they start recycling the same models of kings and princesses. Other times there's a voice filter, but still, it's just cool to listen to what kind of voice he's gonna bring to the table.
Still, you're a confessed criminal and should by rights be hanged.
But as I'm your godson, mercy will take the place of justice. On this occasion only.
Mama! Mama! I must go to the ball!
Mama! Make the men buy us new dresses!
Pinocchio, come play with my pet termites! Is that Stump your mother?
I smell rotten wood!
You stinkhead smell of pigs and old cheese! I'd kick your butts if my feet worked better!
Outside of the first episode being free, each episode was around $2 or $3, I think. I'm not too familiar with episodic games or how long they normally are, but this is definitely the longest one for having 23 episodes. That might sound intimidating, but honestly, each episode is a standalone adventure that has a beginning and an end. They don't really end on a big cliffhanger or teasing what the next episode is going to be like. Oddly enough, some trailers for this game, and even GameTap's old website, state that the game has 24 episodes, but in the final product there's only 23. So, I don't know, maybe that was just some kind of a typo, or maybe that was the original plan and episode 24 just ended up getting scrapped. Now, since each episode is more or less the same in terms of gameplay, I'll give a brief overview on every episode and point out some interesting things about them. A boy learns what fear is. You'd think that with a game about fairy tales would start off with one that is universally well known. Instead, we get a tale that isn't so recognized worldwide. As the name states, the story is about a boy who wants to learn what fear is. And knowing Grimm and his sick, twisted sense of humor, he'll make sure that the boy learns about the definition of fear. Little Red Riding Hood, a simple fairy tale about a girl in a red hood going to Grandma's house while encountering a big bad wolf who has plans for the both of them. Here you get to turn the cheerful woods into a spooky forest, the insides of the wolf's stomach more revolting, and making sure that at least someone dies at the end. The Fisherman and His Wife. A poor fisherman comes across a magic fish who grants him wishes, and the wife keeps pestering him for more stuff for her own well-being. I say the biggest obstacle in this level that you'll have to deal with is the water, seeing as how Grimm can't swim. Puss in Boots. When a man finds himself in possession of a talking cat, the feline promises to assist him in becoming rich and famous. I really like the design of the dark version of Puss in Boots, definitely one of my favorite designs for the character. Also, it's revealed that both Grimm and the 10th Doctor actually have something in common.
Pinocchio once again transforms, becoming an enormous evil.
Pear?
Hey, stay the hell out of my stories, you oversized piece of produce!
The Girl Without Hands. A miller strikes a deal with the devil for promises of riches and wealth in exchange for something behind his mill, which turns out to be his daughter. He then cuts off her hands, and she begins to sob like crazy, which prevents the devil from taking her.
I've no use for a wet woman.
So yeah, this episode's gimmick is that some of the levels have wind physics, where you're being pushed around after jumping. Sometimes it can be useful, but most of the time it works against you. Especially if you somehow get wedged in between some objects and can't get out and you have to restart the level. Still, it's decent, and Grimm makes sure that some karma comes to the miller. Godfather Death. A man gets himself real busy with his wife by having 13 children, and then decides that his newest one should have a godfather. After he rejects both God and the devil, Death himself is selected to be his son's godfather. This one's cool in turning the underworld into something more fitting and spooky, or changing a happy landscape into a winter wasteland with villagers frozen in ice. The Devil and His 3 Golden Hairs. Man, this is the third episode in a row that involves the devil. Anyway, a boy presumably born lucky finds himself in a series of events, from being tricked into mailing his own death sentence to the queen, to bandits changing the letter into a marriage proposal to her daughter, to the angry king sending him to hell to collect 3 golden hairs from the devil before the wedding can begin. Lots of nice creepy imagery when turning the village dealing with the drought into becoming nothing more than a septic tank full of vomit, and one level where you're tiny and have to walk around all over the devil himself when searching for the golden hairs. Beauty and the Beast. There's a beauty, there's a beast, and they eventually get all lovey-dovey with each other. Unless, of course, it's a story written by Grimm. Lots of unique locations in almost every level in this episode, from the village to the forest to the beast's castle to entering the world of dreams and turning them into nightmares. The Master Thief, the start of Season 2, plus this is where we start to see power-ups being used more often. This episode's pretty cool, the story of a self-proclaimed Master Thief proving his worth by completing tasks sent by his godfather, the Count. And the dark version turns the happy environment into something more dark and spooky, making it more of a Van Helsing kind of adventure. So yeah, this is more of the Halloween-themed episode. Plus, the higher level you get, the more black and white the world becomes, like an old-fashioned horror film. That was a nice touch. The Singing Bone. This is a rather odd one to include in this game. So, the story is that 2 brothers are tasked by the king to stop a boar from causing havoc in their village, and promises the marriage to his daughter. One managed to succeed, while the other is lazy and drinking at a pub. After the boar is defeated, the jealous brother gets the other one drunk, and proceeds to kill him, and take all the glory of killing the boar. A few years later, a shepherd discovers the skull of the dead brother, who sings a song about his jealous brother killing him and claiming title of killing the boar. So the king orders the death of the jealous brother, while the skull is given a proper burial. That's already a pretty dark fairy tale, and I haven't come across any versions that try to tone it down either. Well, I guess in this game, the light theater version portrays the boar as being more of an annoyance rather than a real threat. Plus, the added scene in the dark version where the ghost of the dead brother haunts his jealous brother was amusing. King Midas. That's right, we're taking a break from the usual fairy tale stories and delving into the world of Greek mythology. This episode actually focuses on 2 stories with Midas, the one with the golden touch, and the one where he gets donkey ears. Either way, half of the episode is Grimm helping Midas turn the entire world into gold, and ending with a level where he messes around with Zeus and Apollo by making them fight each other and bringing destruction to the earth. Cinderella. The opening to this episode pretty much speaks for itself.
If you know the German or Chinese versions of this tale, you're better off. This Cinderella panders to the emotionally decrepit and mentally deficient.
Here, Grimm makes sure that everyone besides Cinderella experiences some kind of grief and torture. Not much to say here. The Golden Goose. As the title says, there's a golden goose. What it doesn't tell you is that half of the story is focused on a guy who found the goose, trying to complete some task in order to win the hand of the king's daughter. It's also one of the few episodes where a character's model is the same for both the light and dark versions, in this case, the guy who helps the boy eat a mountain of bread. Granted, the character is just a head, but still, very jarring that they couldn't be bothered to think of a light version for this character. Also, this happens.
Perhaps Yoshi's Island is on our route. We'll find it before too long.
Man, now I really want to see that become a fan game. Yoshi's Island, Grimm Edition. Iron John. The tale of a boy encountering a man looking like he's made of iron, or in this case, a robot. In this episode, Grimm decides to make the tale into something more of a sci-fi Terminator spoof, with killer robots and laser guns. So if you ever wanted to hear Roger L. Jackson doing an Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonation, then this is for you.
That's it. You're terminated. Get out. Make me believe you're not an incompetent waste of space and protoplasm.
Also, knowing American McGee's long history of trying and failing to do something related to the Wizard of Oz, this bit of dialogue is the closest you're ever going to get in seeing American McGee's Oz become a reality.
They find the Fiend and dub him Iron John. Well, why not? Looks more like that creaky, heartless tin head from Ozland to me, but who cares?
Huh, now that I think about it, I'm surprised he didn't bother featuring this fairy tale in this game. And then this happens. Yeah, I came across this weird super speed glitch in one of the levels. Not sure what that's all about. The Pied Piper, another one of those fairy tales that has a lot of different retellings. In this case, the rats are treated like an overstock of pets who are peacefully sent away, and the same goes for the children when the Piper goes for them next. But now that Grimm is here, he's bringing on the Black Plague to the town of Hamlin, and makes sure that the children suffer at the Piper's hand. Yeah, it's about as dark as that one Pied Piper film adaptation from Czech. A Christmas Carol. That's right, not even this story is safe from Grimm's re-envisioning. As you can tell, this is the Christmas-themed episode that has a more cynical take on the story about Ebenezer Scrooge encountering Christmas of past, present, and future, making the streets full of bright lights and commercialism, and a big one-on-one fight against a giant Tiny Tim and a giant turkey. Plus, the final level focuses on Grimm going to the North Pole to cause havoc at Santa's workshop, hijack his sleigh, and bring forth his own Christmas cheer onto the world. Also, this version of the story seems to imply that Scrooge and Belle had a child together before he ditched her for his quest to becoming rich, which makes the Dark Theater version even more darker.
Why this spirit? Why must I relive a tragedy? Money had to be made. The child's death was not my doing. We were all starving. There wasn't enough for food.
Oh, and nothing for the child's proper burial?
The child was dead. He didn't mind.
The Frog King, the start of Season 3. This is where the gameplay becomes more smooth, and the levels become a bit more challenging. But yeah, this episode is about a king, or prince in most versions, turned into a frog and is cured thanks to a reluctant princess. Nice swampy atmosphere that Grimm decides to give this story. Also, it's the only episode that has this slime border at the top. Jack and the Beanstalk. Now, some versions try to justify Jack's actions of going to the giant's castle and stealing all his stuff, but not in Grimm's world. It has a few segments where Grimm climbs the beanstalk, but it's still pretty much the same kind of stuff as you'd expect. Mulan, the story of a woman fighting the Huns while disguised as a man, and in this episode, everyone speaks in Chinese.
皇帝专制的封建政治制度，历来都不是天下只此一家，别无分店。
Or at least I think that's Chinese. Not really an expert on that language. Outside of Grimm's dialogue being toned down a bit, there's plenty of violence when covering the world of darkness. Pinocchio, the story about a puppet who wanted to become a real boy. The presentation for it is rather odd, like the scene when Pinocchio gets money from Fire Eater is very brief, and then the story abruptly ends with Pinocchio and Geppetto inside the giant fish, despite the fact that the last level starts off with both of them being free from the fish, and Pinocchio already becomes a real boy. And Grimm then makes him into a giant to cause havoc, ha ha ha. You'd think that would be cool for a final level, but it really isn't. There's no enemies to fight, and giant Pinocchio moves really slowly. Decent stuff, but the ending is weak. Sleeping Beauty, aka Damsels in Distress. Now, here's a very unique episode. It starts off with Sleeping Beauty, but then Grimm starts complaining about having to wait so long for certain events to unfold. So to pass the time, he decides to mess around in other stories like Rapunzel and Rumpelstiltskin. That's right, 3 fairy tales in one episode. The Adventures of Thumbling. I guess they didn't have many ideas for Thumbelina, so instead we have another fairy tale focusing on a tiny person. Sure, seeing Grimm small in a giant realm isn't new, but this is the only episode where every level is being tiny in a big world. The only thing I didn't like was the circus level. It felt like it went on a bit too long. Also, there's a part where you get to go right up a horse's ass, so there's that. And finally, we have the last episode, Snow White. You know, the queen who wants to be the fairest of them all, a beautiful princess, 7 dwarfs, and so on and so on. This is a real good one, with its challenging platforms and some vague implications that this fairy tale is actually Grimm's original homeworld. There's a hilarious bit where near the end all the dwarves start acting like Grimm, and then this happens.
No, I won't accept many pretenders. There can be only one Grimm. There's just one option.
Let's be friends.
Yeah, bright and cheerful Grimm is the strangest yet hilarious thing that happens in this episode. And he pees flowers. How lovely. The ending is really cool. Grimm decides to go to a library where he revisits stories from past episodes and builds an army to go and trash Snow White's wedding. It's great, even if that is the only part of the game that has some continuity. And that concludes American Mcgee's Grimm, a very simple game with some entertaining dark visuals and dialogue. This game was my first introduction to a lot of these fairy tales that aren't the big classics like Red Riding Hood or the Pied Piper. It may not be a game for everyone, but I still think it's worth bringing up to show that American Mcgee has done more than just the Alice games. Even so, not only is this a game hard to sell for newcomers, but it's also hard to find and almost became lost to time. This game was never released physically, although I have come across these CD cases of Grimm episodes that were only released in Russia. Not sure how legit those are. The game was first released on GameTab, which nowadays has gone the way of the dodo. Then it was later ported to Steam, which was the more available option, until it disappeared from a very strange accident. So apparently what happened was that American Mcgee wanted to remove one of his games, Akaniro Demon Hunters, off of Steam, but doing so caused some kind of weird glitch where not only did it remove the game, but it also removed every other game made by Spicy Horse. And to make things even more weird, this act also brought back the once removed Steam version of Alice Madness Returns, which I've heard that version is buggy when compared to the console versions. Mcgee has tried making contact to Steam about this, but it's been a while and it looks like Grimm won't be coming back. A real shame. Nowadays, it looks like the only legit way you can actually play this game is on goodoldgames.com, or GOG.com. Honestly, I'm not too familiar with this site. I've asked some friends about it. They say it's like Steam and having games that are both old and new. And it looks like this version has all 23 episodes available at launch, rather than paying for them separately. So hey, all of that just for $10? That's a pretty good deal. And if sometime in the future GOG.com shares the same fate as GameTab, then hopefully someone was able to save this game via emulation. I mean, might as well. Mcgee has already stated on Steam that the original source code for Grimm has become lost to time, claiming that it was an act of God. Well, I guess that makes sense. I mean, look what happened to Grimm in episode 3.
God lives like a peasant. God lives like a...
Well, that wraps up this episode of Forgotten Media, so this is MeltyMan234 signing out.
May all our stories end so well. Until next time.